All right, thank y'all. Thank y'all for having me. This is the second time I've been here, and I really enjoy coming here. Y'all have an incredible facility, and y'all really are a large group. I got to tell you, when you put out there that you're going to be talking about stats, you never know how many people are going to show up. So I'm very pleased with the turnout, and I promise you I'll keep the stats as light as possible, and we'll talk a lot about gardening and all of that. Dr. Creech gave us a great introduction. I appreciate that. Sally and I are new to Texas Gardener. For those of y'all that don't subscribe, like I said, it's been around. We've started our 38th year. We bought the magazine in July. So Chris Corby and his wife started the magazine in 1981. They did a great job with it. The way we wound up with it, I started writing for the magazine several years ago, and I guess I was the only one that he could talk into taking it from him. But anyway, they did a great job, and I think Texas Gardener has been a great resource to Texas gardeners for years and years. Our byline, just to do our little spill here, the byline, we have some subscribers here, right? I saw some hands. Do y'all know what the byline of Texas Gardener is? It's for Texas gardeners by Texas gardeners. So the thing that we think's always differentiated Texas Gardener from a lot of the other gardening magazines is that everything in our magazine is 100% Texan. So all of our writers are Texan, everything in it 100% Texan. So, you know, Texas is a big place, and it can be difficult to grow in, and so that's what we think that we bring to y'all. We think that, like to think of ourselves as an educational publication. So we have vegetables and ornamentals, and so anyway, and one thing that I'm very, very passionate about, and I'm kind of excited about this seed swap that y'all are going to have in January. I mean, I'll do my own little personal push for this, but you know, to me, I got into running this magazine because I like stories. I love stories. I love learning about stories. I love telling stories. And this heirloom plant swap, this is really kind of a neat deal and a neat opportunity for y'all. You know, I don't know how many of y'all have kind of followed or are aware of the heirloom movement. It's kind of a big deal in you know, home horticulture right now. Baker Creek seeds, are y'all familiar with those? Rare seeds or whatever. If y'all are interested in this stuff, these are seeds that they might not be native to an area, but they've been there for a long time. They've kind of naturalized, and they have stories, you know. And like one of my favorite things on one of those heirloom stories that I read in the Baker Creek Seeds is they were selling a type of pinto bean, and it was called the Trail of Tears pinto bean. Well, the reason it's called the Trail of Tears pinto bean is literally because somebody's Cherokee great-grandmother stuffed that in their pouch on the horse when they were being run out of Georgia and being marched across the South into Oklahoma. And so I like stories like that. I think stories like that are valuable. I think they add to our lives and to our experiences, and especially the experiences of gardening. And so y'all really have a great opportunity at the end of January to bring your heirloom seeds. And what I think is going to be really neat is that they're going to record the stories of them. You know, so a lot of times these stories, they just die. They get lost. And I personally think that's a shame. I know I'm getting a little NPR on you, and I'm sorry, but I really do. I like this stuff, and I think that this is important. So that's a great thing that they're doing. I do urge y'all to take advantage of them. One thing that I think is kind of sad, and I'm looking for it, I'm actively looking for it. So if y'all know of any of these things and you can't come to the plant swap, send me an email. You can reach Sally or I at j@texasgardener.com or sally@texasgardener.com. But we would like to start saving the heirlooms of Texas. And as we've looked out and talked to people, we're not having a lot of luck finding these heirlooms, okay? You know, there's very few, like there's the Porter tomato. Everybody familiar with Porter tomato? It's an older tomato made back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, but Mr. Porter finally passed away. His family didn't want to run it anymore. True Texas heirloom. And so, anyway, if y'all know of any of these heirloom seeds, beans, tomatoes, anything that y'all have got, lettuces or whatever, please tell us about them. We'd like to have some of the seeds. We'd like to preserve them. We'd like to grow them. So, anyway, that's my little pitch for what y'all have got going in January. Let's talk about home garden trends, average gardeners, mean vegetables, and distributed benefits. As Dr. Creech alluded to, in my real job, I am still fully employed by the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. And so I work in a division that works for the CFO, and we literally count the money for MD Anderson. So my team does all the financial analysis for the hospital. Well, when I went to get my horticulture degree, there's a very colorful professor that's been there a long time, and I was all excited. I was going to get my horticultural degree, and he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm working with Charlie Hall, and we're going to do this study of the National Nursery Study. And he goes, boy, he said, you ain't a horticulturalist, you're a damn economist. So that kind of rained on my getting fired up and starting graduate school in horticulture. But in reality, I am kind of an economist. I'm a statistician. That's what I do in my job. That's what I've done for most of my life. But I'm going to try to make this fun and interesting. So, now my clicker's not working. Well, up. Yeah, and I'm an IT guy. So, all right, the center button?
Right button.
Okay.
Jay got a degree from A&M.
That's, I do. I'm an IT guy with a degree from A&M, so I'm in trouble. All right, so tonight, one of the things that we're going to talk about some of the different things about gardening. So, you know, a lot of y'all are very accomplished gardeners, and so we're going to talk about some of the stuff around gardening. We're going to find out who's the average gardener, what are they growing, how big are people's gardeners. You know, I kind of look at this as your nosy neighbor kind of presentation. You know, have y'all ever wondered that? You know, have you ever said, is my garden, do I have a big garden? Do I have a little garden? You know, what are my neighbors growing? And so this is kind of a nosy neighbor presentation. I'll tell you a little story here about pumpkin pie. So my wife has been my biggest fan. She's been my biggest supporter. I would not have gone to A&M without her kind of pushing me to go to A&M. But I'm going to be honest with you. Even though she runs Texas Gardener, she's not much of a gardener. Okay, she doesn't really like to garden. She'll weed and all of that. And she's there with me, but she's not an avid gardener. So I was really kind of surprised last spring. She came to me and she had these heirloom pumpkin seeds. And she said, I want to grow this pumpkin. And I was like, okay, what's the deal? And she said, well, this is one of those giant pumpkins. And she said, you know, if you give it enough water and fertilizer, this thing will grow an 800-pound pumpkin. And I said, well, okay, that's amazing. I was kind of excited, you know, that she was going to finally start taking part in the hobby. And I said, I don't understand, you know, and my wife's a retired school teacher. I need to tell you that. So she thinks a little different than I do sometimes. And she said, well, I want to grow this great old big round pumpkin because somebody told me that if I grow that pumpkin and I cut it in half and I divide the diameter by the circumference, I can make pumpkin pie. So anyway, so that's the first gardening statistic we're going to talk about tonight. Pi. Pi is, what is it? Diameter divided by the radius. All right. The basics. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about a survey that comes out every couple of years. It's called the National Gardening Survey. What this is for, it's not really for you and I, okay? So the people that do this, they do this for what we call the green industry. So have you ever wondered, when you go to a nursery, all y'all go to your local nurseries from time to time or whatever, have you ever noticed that when you go in, you always hear water? You know, you always go in and they're going to have water features, fountains or whatever. You know why? Because of this survey. And we're going to talk some about that, okay? So this survey, these are professional economists who are looking at the whole green industry, and they want to find out what people are growing, what they think they're going to be growing, what they're interested in, what products they're going to be interested in. So this survey is actually designed for industry. But there's a lot of very interesting stuff in it, and I thought it was interesting, and I hope y'all think some of it's interesting as well. So, all stats based on 120 million U.S. households. That's why this thing only comes out every couple of years. It is a very large data set. It takes a whole lot of time to reach this many people, okay? How many people are there in the United States? 330 million, 340 million, something like that. So they're reaching a large percentage of the population. I don't know who these people are. Have y'all gotten a survey? No, I hadn't gotten a survey either, but they swear that they're reaching 120 million households. Okay, so the first thing that's kind of interesting to me is who is the average gardener in the U.S.? And I thought it would be fun to have everybody stand up, and then I was like, no, people will think that's cheesy or whatever, so we'll just do it with slides here. Who do you think the average gardener is? What does the average gardener look like? Well, the first thing that I can tell you about the average gardener is she's female. Does that surprise you? You know, when I first read it, it did kind of surprise me, but the more that I've done this and the more that I go to these kind of presentations and we talk to people, I'm no longer surprised. I would say that it's probably overwhelmingly female. I would bet it's probably 60-40. I mean, that's been my personal experience. All right, the average gardener. That's a picture of my wife, because my wife looks a whole lot like the average gardener. The average gardener is female. She's over 45 years old. What else do you think she might do? Well, she's going to cook. But the average gardener has at least some college education. This is very interesting to me. She works in her garden 5 hours a week. Now, and this is where I talk about the nosy neighbor kind of thing. I mean, just kind of as a show of hands, how many people in here think you work in your garden more than 5 hours a week? Yeah, I was really surprised at how low this number was and some of these other numbers. So the average gardener is married or partnered, and she lives in a house with about $75K of income. So she's affluent. She's affluent, she's educated, she's probably getting close to retirement. She has time, money, and interest. So this is our average gardener. And I will tell you, this is probably our average Texas Gardener reader. You know, I mean, this is probably the average person that's in here. So that's very, very interesting to me is, you know, what makes up an average gardener. When you work at your house, you know what you know. You see what's in front of you. And so this stuff is very interesting to me. How many people think that their vegetable garden is more than 600 square feet? Yeah. Now, how many people, does everybody vegetable garden or, I'm sorry? Flowers. Okay, we'll talk some about flowers too. So the average vegetable garden is 600 square foot. That's not very big. That's a 20 by 30 garden. But I can tell you what, I have a garden at my house that's it's 25 by 25, 525 square feet. And that's why these statistics started standing out to me. I understand that if you have a garden space, and it doesn't matter if it's vegetables or flowers or whatever, 525 to 600 square feet, I think you can manage that in 5 hours a week. And you can have a very lovely and very productive garden. But that was surprising to me. You know, my vegetable garden is much bigger than that. My vegetable garden is 60 by 40. You know, it's 2,400 square feet. But I don't think I'm the average gardener. Okay, the median vegetable garden. What is the median? This is one of those statistical terms that I screwed up the last time that I gave this speech. When I walked out, this nice gentleman stuck a piece of paper in my hand, and he said, "You were talking about the mode." So let's just review real quick. The median is the point in a distribution where half fall below and half fall above. Is that correct? Okay, this is very interesting to me. 96 square feet. That is the median position in this data set. That's 100 square feet. That's 10 by 10, and that's the middle. So that means half the gardeners that responded to this survey are gardening or growing in an area less than 10 foot by 10 foot. And that was very surprising to me. That seems small, But I mean, one thing that I do realize that I live in the country. I have land. I have plenty of room to garden as big as I want. But I think a lot of these people, to reach 120 million households, you're talking to people in cities. And a lot of people in town, they don't have room to garden like I do. So that's why the average garden is 96 square feet or below. All right, how many gardeners are there? This is always a very interesting stat. I've read on this. It says 74% of households in the U.S. garden. And the only way I read through the data on this and everything, and I think they have a very loose definition of what a gardener is. If you have a house plant, I think you can call yourself a gardener. But that's fine, because we're going to talk about that later, okay? And you know how everything kind of comes in and out of vogue, okay? I remember when I was a kid, the first time I was aware of this was Happy Days. Y'all remember Happy Days? I thought, man, I've figured the world out. All I've got to do is in 20 years, when I'm about 30, all I've got to do is bring back a TV program about the 70s and I'm going to get rich. Because that's how life is, you know. Everything just kind of recycles itself at different times. So we all kind of laughed about houseplants, but, you know, several years ago, houseplants were huge. I mean, how many people, you know, I know houseplant names probably before I knew outside plant names, you know, Dieffenbachia and all of that, because people used to, in the 60s and the 70s, houseplants were a very big thing. It was a very big thing. Well, guess what? We now know, because of the study, we'll get to that, houseplants are coming back. And so they want to know how many people have one plant in their house. One ivy in their office that goes up the wall and runs all over the tops of the windows and all of that. So 74% of all households do some kind of gardening. That's 1 million more than the last time they did that study. So that's a lot. You know, I mean, our population is growing, so we're going to get some just by the population getting bigger. But I think what this is telling us is that people like gardening. Gardening is kind of having a renaissance. It's coming back. It's kind of cool to garden now. So that's 1% a year. This was very interesting. 1% growth each year since 2009. So what are the top gardening activities? And this is, I like this. I like all this male, female stuff and right brain, left brain stuff and all this. So this is without being sorted by gender, but it's very different. Here in a minute, we'll look at it. There are different activities based on your gender. So the top gardening activities that people take part in, 55 million people, or 46% of those people that responded, do lawn care. But when you break that out by sex, who do you think does the more lawn care? Men, okay? Flower gardening is next. So you asked about the flower gardening. Flower gardening is the second most participated gardening activity that there is. And y'all, I'm sorry, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to stop me.
I'd like to know about the perspective on that photo.
The perspective on it?
Those are very big vegetables.
Well, these are not vegetables. So this is a cushaw melon. Are you familiar with cushaws? So a cushaw, it's a squash, and some of these squash will be 35, 40, 50 pounds. And I mean, they grow them here in East Texas. They use them, they make pies out of them, cushaw pies and all that. So it's just a big, sweet squash. And then those are actually pumpkins. But you can see the size. Those are crotons, and then these are chrysanthemums and some marigolds. But very, very good. But the perspective of it, I was driving by with my iPhone, and that's, so that has a little something to do with it. But anyway, 29% do flower gardening. And this is very exciting to me. I personally enjoy flower gardening probably more than I enjoy the vegetables. I grow vegetables. I probably dedicate 3 or 4 times as much space to vegetables, but it's kind of more of a hobby. I mean, it's actually the flowers and the perennials that kind of get me fired up in my personal garden. You know, in this vegetable gardening thing, how many of y'all have seen steel magnolias? I love steel magnolias. Y'all remember Weezer? You know, when Weezer would come into the, what was it called, where Dolly Parton's place, where she did their hair? Truvies. Truvies Salon. And she'd bring in that thing of tomatoes, and she'd be like, oh, God, take these. I hate these. And they're like, Weezer, why do you grow them, She said, because I'm an old Southern woman. I'm supposed to wear big floppy hats and dig in the dirt. That's what I'm supposed to do. And that's kind of how I think it is with our vegetable garden, I do have a large vegetable garden, but I actually enjoy our flower garden much more in the perennial garden. And that makes me feel good to know that I'm not the only one. However, when we break that out by gender, who do you think participates in flower gardening the most? Women. Houseplants. Now, I was truly shocked by this number, and this is one of those things where this is what retailers are paying to see. Retailers want to see this. They say, okay, this is something new. So I promise you that as you start going to your garden centers over the next year, 2, 3 years, you're going to start seeing more and more houseplants available for sale. And then finally, the vegetable garden. This really, really shocked me that of all gardeners, only 27% said that they were vegetable gardeners. I don't know about y'all, but typically, when somebody says they garden, I almost always imagine a vegetable garden before I do anything else. But according to these stats, fewer of us are growing food. So anyway, I'm sorry?
It's the most disappointing of them because they failed.
Well, it is. Honestly, that's true. I mean, so your zinnias, think about your zinnias or your marigolds. You put them out there, they're pretty much going to look great until the bugs get them or whatever. And then when the bugs get them, you just leave them alone. They reseed, and in 3 or 4 months, they give you more flowers and all of that. And, we'll talk about it easy. But, yeah, vegetable gardens will break your heart. And it'll drain your pocketbook, too. All right, so here's the top gardening activities by dollars. This right here is what the green industry really wants to know. They want to know how much we're spending on our hobby. Now, some of these things are not really that surprising to me. The landscape, $206 a year. And this could be, when I looked at the stats, this could be anything from paying somebody to come out and spread your fertilizer to trimming your shrubs or whatever. Lawn care, primarily mowing, fertilization. That's primarily what's doing that. Tree care. This was interesting to me. Number one, that it was the third highest by dollar thing that people spend money on. But if you've ever, how many people have ever had a big tree that's had a problem? You know that it's expensive to get an arborist to come out and fix that and take care of it. And we do love our trees, right? I mean, it takes forever to get them, so we're going to take care of them. The flower garden, evidently, if you want to garden cheaply and, kind of get the most bang for your buck, do the flower garden and the vegetable garden, because $57 in the vegetable garden. Now, I don't have this stat in here, but this is kind of interesting to me. With that $57, I've read another stat somewhere, and I wished I had put it in here. I just read this. They said that the average value of an average, 600 square foot vegetable garden with the vegetables that you grow is about $800 a year. That you can produce $800 worth of produce in your 600 square foot garden. That's not a bad return for $57. Now, how many of y'all here really grow for the food? I mean, most of us, well, okay, very good. I mean, we grow, we can, and all of that. But I mean, realistically, a lot of us are growing for the exercise, for being outside, for the tradition. I garden because my parents gardened and my grandparents gardened, and we can for the same reason. But I just like that. $57. I mean, this is a cheap hobby, folks. I mean, if you've got the place to grow it, $57, that's pretty cheap. That's, what, lunch 4 times? So... Well, now, you and I need to talk, because you're not the average gardener, I can tell you. Sally and I buy mulch, or we buy compost. We buy mushroom compost. We live a little bit from Madisonville. Y'all familiar with Madisonville? Mushroom capital of... We buy an 18-wheeler worth of mulch every year, so we're not the average vegetable gardener. But, I mean, I think that's very neat. $57, you can really grow a lot of food or a lot of flowers. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And another thing that's been very interesting to me, you know, it's like say I've had to rethink how I look at things. But when somebody says the vegetable garden, what do y'all think of in length of time on the vegetable garden? And I think this is where we have to remember that they're surveying people all the way across the country, okay? My vegetable garden at my house produces from January to December. So, and I think out here, y'all can have vegetables that produce from January to December. So I really doubt that you're going to have a $57 vegetable garden, okay? I mean, just the simple fact that you're going to be planting your things at least twice a year means down here it's going to cost more, but I think we'd also get much more food, right? So when we look at these statistics, we do have to keep in mind that, you know, different parts of the country, if you live, you know, north of Oklahoma, you're getting one garden a year, period. And so, all right, when you're in extension, I love extension horticulture. Most of the people that write for our magazine come from extension horticulture. They're either retired or active extension agents. Y'all have had one of the finest here. Y'all had Greg Grant for a long time. He writes for the magazine. When you go into extension, they tell you that you only need to learn 3 things if you're going to be an extension agent. All you have to learn is turf, trees, and tomatoes. Because they say that's all people care about, okay? 97% of your questions are going to be over these 3 things: turf, trees, and tomatoes. And so when they told me this, I thought, this is kind of fun, you know, that's cute, what a cute little saying or whatever. And then I started my blog, and then I started writing for this magazine, and then I started looking at some of these survey results, and guess what? There's really only about 3 things that people that garden care about. They care about turf, trees, and tomatoes. So let's look at some of this. On turf, okay? So if, you know, you can get all into turf. Turf is what it is. We love turf, okay? Unless we're in Austin or San Antonio, and then, you know, we love decomposed granite and cactus, and that's okay. But in most parts of the country, we love turf. And we spend a ton of money on turf. $8 billion every year is spent on your grass. 55 million of those 120 million households have a yard. So it is the highest category by far of all of the other gardening tasks. And I'll be honest with you, this kind of surprised me. I don't, you know, everybody does it different, but I have a lovely St. Augustine yard. I fertilize twice, I mow, and that's pretty much my lawn care routine. So I was really surprised that people spend that much. But I looked into it, and these costs can also be for the people that are mowing your lawn. So if you're not mowing your lawn, that's also in there because they're trying to capture this information for landscaping firms and all. But it is the highest category for spending and participation. So that 55 million of the 120, you know, that's almost 50%. No other gardening activity has that much participation. And in this one, this was another one that they brought out that was very interesting. It doesn't matter on educational level. Everybody wants a pretty yard. And everybody's willing to spend the money and do the work to have it. Trees. Trees. $22 billion annually spent on trees. But this is one of those hobbies too where it's primarily, or not primarily, but the numbers very much favor men on doing tree care. So, I'm sorry? Huh.
I do the tree part.
Well, like I say, these are averages. So, yes, ma'am.
We're considering the people that go out and plant a yard of grass as gardeners.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
That's
So,
why we have the 20 million households, you know, because everybody has their lawn.
that is true. But
It also includes households that are an apartment and have no lawn, and they have a couple of houseplants.
that's right. So that's like that median garden that we talked about that was 96 square feet. So my mother lives in a retirement community and she lives in an apartment, but she still loves to garden. So she has a little balcony that's probably 10 feet long by about 3 feet, and she's got it completely covered with little potted plants. And my mother very much thinks she's a gardener. I mean, and she is. I'm not belittling that. I mean, what is a gardener? What are you doing, whether you're growing a vegetable, a blade of grass, a tree? What are you doing?
I had a coworker that had his vegetable garden in pots.
Yeah, there. Yeah, I went and saw.
He was in an apartment.
Yeah, we went and saw a guy. You know the mineral licks that they put out for the cows, those big plastic tubs? His entire garden was in that. He had rows and rows of them, and I thought it was an incredible idea because guess what he doesn't have to do? He doesn't have to weed, you know? I mean, he's got these little pots. He covers them up with vegetables and everything. I mean, I think that's a great option. Oh, we didn't talk enough about tomatoes. Okay, tomatoes. Here's one thing that I like about tomatoes, and this may or may not surprise you. Most grown vegetable in the world. Does that surprise you? No, every country has tomatoes. If you ever look at, this is very interesting to me because, you know, it's one of those things that I just really never had thought of. But if you want an early ripening tomato, so you're going to, you know, plan your garden, you know, especially where I live a little further south than y'all. I'm zone 9. And my house, my tomato garden's done by July 4th because it gets so hot, it just burns everything up. So what we're trying to do when we're trying to start our seeds and grow our tomatoes early is we're trying to beat that steady 100-degree heat where it's 82 degrees at night and 104 during the day. We're trying to beat that. A lot of these early ripening tomatoes, do y'all ever read what's on a tomato package? You know, it will tell you days to maturity and everything. A lot of those days that will say the 90 days to maturity, so on and so forth. You know where their genetics come from? Russia. You know, I mean, I thought that they grew wheat and drank vodka. I thought that's what horticulture was in Russia. But all of these early ripening tomatoes that we get, they come from the Russians. So that's just all kinds of little horticultural trivial facts here. So anyway, #1 vegetable all over the world. So people really do love their tomatoes. So what is the average gardener growing? And I like this sign. We have a friend. This is what, you know, I wrote an article a long time ago about, you know, why we garden, and gardening, for a lot of people, gardening is not about cheap food. You know, I mean, by the time this gentleman here, he's in Austin, he has a small backyard, but he has a lovely cistern that he had installed for his vegetable garden, and he's built lovely cold frames, and he said he's got about $20,000 in infrastructure in his backyard for his 6 tomato plants. And so that's why he has that. Okay, here are the top 10 vegetables grown in the U.S. And the way this worked in the survey, these are of the people that have a vegetable garden, the percentage you see up there, they said they grow this vegetable in their garden. Okay, so if you're not a vegetable garden, you didn't have a say-so. So 86% of home gardens grow tomatoes. So that right there tells a story. We love our tomatoes. Cucumbers are #2. I was kind of surprised that sweet peppers were #3. Beans, carrots, summer squash, onions, hot peppers, lettuce, peas, and sweet corn. So, I mean, does that look like y'all's garden? Yeah, I mean, it pretty much, it does. So it was interesting to me that it was that way across the nation, because I would say that's a pretty good representation of an average vegetable garden that we have down here.
What year was this done?
This one was done a year and a half ago. You know what? The hot pepper, you're right. So there are trends right now, and peppers are one of them. And you're seeing it. So a lot of the things that happen in the food industry kind of drive the trends that you'll see in the horticulture industry. And hot peppers and eating hot stuff and all of that, that is cool and hip right now. So you're right. So I work, it's very interesting to me. I'm sorry?
East Texas, we grow okra.
Well, but it's not very hot. Kind of itchy, but It is good. It is good. So I work in an office with a bunch of immigrants. I work with a bunch of people from India, and they love hot, spicy food. And so all of them, and they'll bring me stuff to grow. They'll say, hey, we grew this at home. Can you grow this? But then what they do is they bring me peppers, and they all they're growing. Have y'all ever tried the ghost pepper? Have y'all seen this little, oh, I mean, so you're right, sir. Hot things are very much trendy now. They're on the rise. And you see it in foods too. I mean, you can go to restaurants now and you can get hamburgers with ghost peppers and things like that. So I think that is very interesting that a lot of the trends that we see in the horticultural world also tie in with the food industry. So, all right, here are some of the things. And how am I doing on time?
I'm retired.
I'm sorry?
I'm retired.
Yeah. Well.
Take your time.
How much? I got 15 minutes. Okay. Okay, so why did I bring this up? You know, gardening is one of, I personally think, and there are some studies that show this, that a friend of mine sent me an article the other day out of the UK. And if you think we like to garden, the English really like to garden, okay? They're doing some research over there now, and, you know, everybody wants to live to be 100. So that's kind of the magic thing. We've kind of got it to where everybody can live to be 80 pretty easily now, so they want to push that to 100. And so what everybody's saying now is that if you want to live to 100, you need to have a plant-based diet, and you need to have moderate exercise. Well, how better to have a plant-based diet and moderate exercise than to garden? So this is one of the reasons I think that gardening is kind of hip and hot right now, is it's just getting covered on a lot of ways, you know? I mean, you want to know what you're putting in your body, right? So that's one good reason to garden. But really, I think that the exercise part of gardening is very much a true benefit to our hobby. So here are some positive things for the green industry. Spending and participation in the hobby continue to increase. And so I do think that's very interesting that gardening gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger every year. Flower gardening is on the rise. So many people, you know, they don't really consider that they put a few zinnia seeds out that they're a gardener. But flower gardening is very much on the rise. One of the things that I get excited about with flower gardening is how many, somebody spit out a number here. What percentage of the cut flowers sold in the United States do you think are grown in the United States? What? 10. Ding, 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 ding. That is correct. 10% or less of the cut flowers sold in the United States are actually grown here. Where are they grown? Central America, Central and South America. Primarily down in this part of the country, our flowers are coming to us from Colombia, okay? So one thing that I get excited about, you know, I'm a storyteller, and remember, you know, I like the stories and everything. One thing that I like right now is a thing that's called the slow flowers movement. Have any of y'all heard of this? Have you heard of the slow food movement? So the slow food movement is where you want to try to eat local. You want to set a limit and eat within 50 miles or 100 miles. You want all of the components of your meal to have come from there. Well, we're also trying to do this in the green industry. We're bringing back local flowers. Now, up until the 1970s, 90% of the cut flowers grown in the sold in the United States were grown here. Okay, so there's been a shift, and there's been all kinds of reasons for it, government policy, things like that, bad government policy. But flower gardening is on the way back. And there are certain retailers that are doing their part. Whole Foods, Central Market, which is a part of HEB, they are actually focusing on, they're doing it nationwide for Whole Foods. I mean, HEB is local. But they are focusing on local Texas flower farmers. And I like this. I mean, I think it's an incredible thing. We have friends that grow out in the hill country, and if you want to talk about a beautiful sight, is walk out into like a 40-acre pasture of flowers and different types of blooms. And another thing that's interesting about that, if you want to garden for money, if you really wanted to retire and make money on your 1 acre or half acre or whatever you got, you should grow flowers. Okay? Flowers on average return $1 an acre more than any other crop or any other food crop, horticultural crop. So you want to grow flowers if you really want to make money in the flower industry. Okay, here's another thing that's very big is water. So water is a big deal right now. Remember how I told you at the beginning of this talk, if you've ever noticed when you walk into your garden center and you listen, you'll always hear water there or whatever. This year you're going to see water at the front. When you walk in, you're probably going to have the retailers have moved their fountains and all of that up to the front because for some reason they're cool. People want their backyard pools, they want their gurgling streams, they want their little fountains or whatever. So you're going to see a lot of water gardening. So buy you a little tub, start learning about some of the aquatic plants. That's a whole different way of gardening, and evidently everybody's doing it. And so, all right, and then the other thing is organics are still big. Did y'all hear the recent result of the trial in California where the groundskeeper at the school in California just sued Monsanto and won big? They said, yes, you did get whatever kind of cancer you got from spraying Roundup for all of these years. You know, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I'd be interested to see all the science, but it doesn't really matter. Organics are huge right now, okay? You know, I have a gardening magazine. I have a big Facebook presentation. I learned something very, very good to know back in the summer. We were talking about, God, I'm having a brain freeze here. I'm sorry? Senior moment. That's right. I'm having a senior moment. The little moths that get in your St. Augustine. Not chinch bugs. No, not the Japanese beetle. It's the little moth. It's the armyworm. It's the armyworm moth. And so they were having outbreaks in the Dallas area and everything. And so I went on and I said, okay, if you want to kill this thing, you need to spray it with a Bayer product, and then you need to come back in a week and spray it again with another Bayer product. Oh my God, my Facebook just blew up, okay? People were like, oh, why would you do that? You know, that's chemicals, that's Monsanto, blah, 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 blah. Well, the reason I'm doing it is because I want to kill the bug that's eating my St. Augustine. And they were like, well, you can do it organically. And yes, you can do it organically if you're willing to put out BT every 5 days for every day or every week of summer, you can control it organically. So I'm kind of mixed on the organics, but it doesn't really matter whether I'm mixed or not. People like organics now. You know, you were talking about how much compost did you buy? You're buying it in bulk. People like that. And there's absolutely no problem with it. I'm a big fan of the organics. How many of y'all garden organically? Yeah, I think that's getting more and more every year. So the other positives with this is you're local. This goes back to the local flower farmers that I was talking about. People enjoy consuming things that are produced locally. So this gives you some opportunities if you're interested, if you're in the green industry or you're interested in trying to make money here. Now here are some problems that we do have in the green industry. Look around here and remember the average gardener that we talked about today? Well, we don't have very many millennials here, okay? And we don't know what's going on. Gardening is so hot. And this is, I primarily do this, I gave this at a Master Gardener convention, and they're educators. They're out working with the public, and we're trying to come up with ways. We need to find ways as horticulturalists to engage our children. You know, somehow we have like a lost generation in horticulture. People our age and older, we get it, we love it, and all of that, and we're getting more and more. But the 30-year-olds, they're not really growing. So I don't know how to solve this, but this is some of the information that they've found from this survey is that not only are we not attracting them, they're actually trying it and dropping out. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to make the point that at that age, they're busy in their career and they have have children, and who has time to garden when you have a career?
I think you're exactly right. I've got kids that are this age. My wife and I have kids that range from 28 to 38. Like I say, they've got kids, they're starting their careers. And I do understand that that's why the average gardener is a 45-year-old female, is because her kids have finished high school, they've moved on. But still, a lot of those millennials, they're not getting married until they're 30 or 35 years old. I just read a study the other day that said the average age for a female to get married in the United States now is 28, and it's 32 for a male. So there are opportunities. There are a whole bunch. They're kind of like the baby boomers. There's a whole bunch of them. And so if you're a garden educator, if you care about promoting our hobby, we've got to find a way to pull these people in. Another problem is that the boomers are aging. So, as much as we like to garden, every year that you get older, Texas summers get hotter, right? And so we might like to garden, but the reality is we're kind of slowing down, So we really do need to start bringing those people in that are going to replace us. Here's another problem in what we call the green industry, and I think many of y'all agree, DIY is going away. People don't mow their yards anymore, okay? People don't trim their hedges anymore. People don't mulch their beds. They don't spray their roses. DIY is going away. So while this really isn't a problem for y'all, I mean, it is a good thing for the people that can afford them. They have the lovely yards and all of that. But it's a bad thing for retailers, because they're not selling as much herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers and all as they used to, because all of the people are buying it from the commercial providers. Okay, so even though our hobby has had steady growth since 2008, it still hasn't been as good as it was in 2002. So we kind of had this big boom up to 2002, and then it kind of leveled off, and then we had 2008. And when the economy went down, believe it or not, when the economy is not good, that's a very good thing for the green industry. So I don't know what it kicks in, our survival mechanisms or whatever, the value in our 401k goes down, so everybody thinks they need a garden. But so things have started going up. But even though it's a positive outlook, know that we are not at the levels that we were gardening, 15, 16 years ago. So here's opportunities. Like I say, this was designed for educators. But we need to redefine gardening. We need to talk about, what is gardening? It's like they said earlier, so they're counting a lawn as a garden. We need to encourage people to get out there, grow that house plant, grow that patio plant. That's the fastest growing area of the gardening segment is gardening small, container gardenings and things like that. We need to stress the fun and the benefits of it. And then another thing, like on my magazine, I'm going to do a little shameless plug here for the magazine. We're going to introduce a section in this next issue that we're calling Little Green Thumbs. So I really do believe in gardening, and I believe that gardening is great for yourself, for your kids. So you want to encourage green time versus screen time. This Little Green Thumbs, if you've got kids or grandkids, and this is the plug time. This is subscribe to my magazine time here. But one thing that we're going to do to try to bring in some more people is we're going to start this section called Little Green Thumbs, and there are going to be activities every month that you can do with your child or your grandchild to take them outside, get them involved with growing. They're going to be simple little activities. The first one we're going to feature is looking at seeds, taking seeds apart and all of that. Then we're going to do one that are like apple tattoos and all of that. So anyway, I would encourage you. We're all gardeners. You wouldn't be here listening to a statistics lecture on gardening if you weren't gardeners. But share our hobby. Share the goodness of it. Share it with your kids. Share it with your family. Share it with your neighbors. And that's it. Yeah. So I'll take any questions if y'all have anything. And I will tell y'all one thing. I said that I did love coming over here, and we love the gardens over here. For those of y'all that do not subscribe to our magazine, this was the cover in November, December. Do y'all know where this picture was taken? Huh? Right out here. And so Greg Grant actually took this picture. So, and if any of y'all are interested and you've not had the magazine, see Sally and I. We've got it back there. We've got some, we can send home with you or whatever. Yes, Dr. Creech.
You said we were kind of at a high level back in 2002, and then we had come down a little bit, or we had to increase that in this money. What about if you go back all the way to the 70s?
So I haven't seen that, and that would be a very interesting.
My only comment is that Texas A&M, I think you might relate it to horticulture enrollment, but Texas A&M in 1977 had 650 students in horticulture. SFA had 100 students majoring in horticulture in 1977. And A&M has 140.
It's way down, yeah.
And SFA is at 30, 32, or something like that. So something happened from the 70s. How many people grew up as a youngster in the 70s? See? There you go. So what do you think it was about the 70s?
What? Well, yeah, but I want to answer that. I mean, one thing I can say is in the 70s, my favorite book came out, and what we're seeing it now was the Lorax. I mean, the 70s were a time when it was kind of like now, I'm kind of writing a piece on this, so I feel all knowledgeable. But back in the 70s, this was a scary time. And, we had 3 Mile Island and the Superfunds and acid rain and all of that. And then Dr. Seuss wrote the Lorax. And, unless somebody like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better, it's not. And so I think that's when horticulture really did kind of start having its best press and pushing forward, because people really did want to go out and save the world. And now, guess who those people are? It's us. I mean, the Lorax came out in 1971. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Is that?
I just looked at this from a statistical point of view, from what you just said earlier. You said the average is female, and she's equal to or greater than 45 years old.
Greater than 45,
right,
yes, ma'am.
Greater than 45. All right. The baby boom started in 1945.
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess you consider that huge growth in our population, and probably
45 to 64 was the boom.
45 to 64. All right. So you take the mean of 45 to 64, and you look at that, and you add, let's say, okay, let's go at 55. In 1955, children born in 1955 became 45 in 2000.
Oh, there you go.
So you get your peak in 2002, and it's dropping because that population is dropping. I mean, the gardeners have dropped out. So it's just.
I like you.